The next test in OSPF is going to be testing MD5 authentication. MD5 authentication is much better because in simple password, the password is actually sent in OSPF packet in clear text. So anytime it is intercepted, it is vulnerable because the attacker will know what the password in the network is, or at least on a given segment. In this particular situation, even if they intercept the packets, the OSPF packets, the authentication is hashed. So the only way to actually break this security is to use brute force attack and try to recreate the same hash using different passwords fed into the algorithm. So similarly to simple password, there's two ways of doing authentication with MD5. I can enable authentication MD5 globally. Now I've modified my topology a little bit for future testing. So if I want to authenticate R4 and R5 here, I could do this in two ways. So currently there is no authentication. The easiest way to check this is basically doing show IP OSPF interface E0045, and there's this big output. The last line in the output in Cisco iOS is always authentication. So here I see the neighbor count on the segment is 1. I'm adjacent with this router, but there's no authentication last line here. So if I go to global config mode, I will enter OSPF process 1. I can say all interfaces in area 0 should be authenticated using MD5. Tab didn't work for some reason. And message digest. If I hit enter, that's simple password. If I say message digest, that's authentication using MD5. Obviously now I'm authenticating all hello packets, and the neighbor has no authentication, so in about 40 seconds I'm going to lose my neighbor R5. Do show IP OSPF interface E0045 here. The last line says, the second to the last line says, authentication message digest is enabled. Currently there is no key. The key must be done on the interface basis. So if I want to create a key, it must be done on interface basis. If, however, I don't want to authenticate every single interface, for example, I don't want to authenticate here, those two sub-interfaces, because there are no routers, OSPF routers down there. Similarly here, I'll just use the authentication and the keyword on per interface basis here. So I'm going to remove that command using no area 0 authentication message digest, and I'm going to jump onto the interface in question. So interface E0045. This is how I'm going to do this. So do show IP OSPF interface E0045. There is no authentication, so the last line says nothing. The second last lines say nothing about authentication, so I'll say IP OSPF message digest key, and my key. Now in this authentication, not only the method has to match, but also the key number. If I have key 1 on one end and key 2 on the other end, they won't talk. There will be a problem. Actually, let's do that. I'll go key 2, and my MD5 password will be Cisco 123, and I will enable now, turn on the authentication IP OSPF authentication message digest now. So do show, I have this command right here. So now I have enabled that message digest authentication, and I use the key, youngest key is number 2. Do show run interface E0045. There we go. So I'm going to copy that command, these two commands in fact, like that. I'm going to bring them over to R5, but I'm going to mess up a little bit here, because when I paste it in, I need to enter the interface 0045 first. So I'm going to paste them in. Here, however, I'll do key number 1. And now we do debug IP OSPF adjacency. So shortly, do you all just disable debug prepare, and shortly I'm using key number 1 here, youngest key, and there we go. It says mismatched authentication key. It's not the password that is the problem, it's the key number. No message digest key 2 on interface, and we're receiving key number 2 from the other end. So if I correct that, if I'll say no, so on this other end, actually I want to have key number 1 here. If I say no, key number 2 instead, I'll do key number 1. Very quickly, I'm going to have my adjacency established. So this way we can protect our network from potential rogue routers placed on the network by attackers by enabling the authentication using message digest in OSPF.